Akira The Don, thank you for coming on the podcast. It's incredible to have you here. Such a real, authentic, vibing human being. So I'm grateful to have you here.
Yeah, likewise.
Yes. Yeah,
What's cracking with you? How you doing?
I'm doing incredible. And like I was just telling you before, I just had you in my ears. I just had you interviewing and talking to some of the most brilliant minds that are from our generation. And you're interacting with them yourself and talking to them and presenting ideas. And it was just such a joy to listen to you just interact with someone I've listened to for so long in Naval and Jordan Peterson. So very cool, man. It's such an honor to have you here. But I think we should start with you the day before your 16th birthday. What was that? What was that experience like?
Is this are you referring to something you already know here, or are you just is this?
It was just a guess for a single day. I had a feeling that day might be impactful. Just a random guess.
Yeah, I left home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't particularly like a pleasant or graceful leaving of home. It was all right, go on then, fuck off then, you little shit type situation. That's funny. Yeah, I left home that day and I went and stayed with my nan in a local village, little mini. Well, it was more like we was in a village and she was in a tiny little town in Wales. I went and stayed with my nan. Well, that didn't last very long. She kicked me out because there were some issues with the local hoodlums I was hanging out with. So I went and lived in a tent in the woods. And I was doing my GCSEs, which is the exams you do in the UK when you're like 15, 16. And my school was in the nearest big town, which is called Bangor, which is like a kind of like a 30-minute drive, like 4-hour walk or some shit like that. And I was hitchhiking to get into school to go and do my exams from living in this tent, sleeping in a tent in the woods. And I was going out in the morning and nicking milk and cheese off of people's doorsteps.
Oh my God.
And shit was crazy. That was a crazy time period. I had a couple jobs. I had a job in Bangor. I was glass collecting in a pub called the Old Vaults. And I had a job in a chemist. Both of those didn't last that long. But yeah, I would get up and I would go hitching to school and go do my exams, and then I'd go work in the pub or shit of that nature, or I'd go off and be having adventures. Yeah, that was an interesting period of time.
When you say hitching, you mean you were getting in people's cars that you didn't know who they were? And that was how you would get to school?
Yeah, you stick your thumb out and someone drives past, and you'd like, because if occasionally someone didn't pick me up, and then I would be late for my exams. You know? I was predicted to do very well in, I think it was either my English or my drama. It was the same teacher. I can't remember which. And I didn't get to the exam on time because of that. And she was like running around down Lower Bangor and around the town looking for me. She'd heard like these rumors about Akira's like, he's left home, he's living in weird places, da, 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 da. She was off looking for me. Couldn't find me.
Wow.
I think I still got a C on that exam just on coursework alone. But that was, anyway, I finished that and that was the end of my education. And then I left Wales and went off on adventures to different parts of the world and country and shit.
Yeah. What do you think you'd be doing when you were 16 years old in the future?
Well, my aim was to be making music, you know. At that point, there wasn't the internet. It was just before the internet. I didn't know at that point that in fucking a couple of years there'd be this internet thing. When I was like 15, 16, there wasn't, not where I was. I mean, I know it existed. We didn't know about that kind of shit where I was in my little Welsh town. And what I worked out was, like, I wanted to make music and have a band and all that type of thing, you know. And I was kind of experimenting. I was making little things. I was copying cassettes to another cassette and chopping it up and rewinding it and splicing it and doing all this weird type shit, you know. And I had access to a PC computer and it had a program on it. I can't remember the name of the program, but you could sample like 10 seconds of audio or something. It had a little sampler in it and you could sample up to 10 seconds. And I remember making a song where I sampled like the drums from a Beastie Boys song and the guitar from a Suede song called We Are the Pigs. and the Beastie Boys, and from Sure Shot. That was it. And I made a beat doing that. But yeah, I had this. There was no internet and shit, and it was like I used to read music magazines kind of religiously, and to work out how people got on. And it was always either like nepotism, you know, it was always some kind of nepotism or some kind of crazy luck or something. You know, it was like no one ever got signed because they sent a demo tape in and someone heard it. Really, it was always some connection. So I had this idea that I would go become a music journalist, and then I would know people in the music industry, and that way I could get on. So that's what I did. I moved to London and just started hanging. Well, I used to ride a train, jump a train to London, which is where you don't pay for the ticket. And I'd go into London and I would just go to gigs, and I would blag my way into the gigs because I had a fanzine. I used to like draw comics and review music in the back of them and photocopy them and sell them in newsagents and shit. And I found out about the music press and how that worked, and bands would have press offices and you could write to them and they would give you tickets to get into a gig for free. You could get on a guest list, or they'd send you records, that type of shit, you know? So I would go along and review gigs and like meet people and shit with this plan of moving to London and becoming a music journalist professionally, which I basically did. But it didn't quite work the way I thought it would. I turned up in London with my bag, and I was supposed to be staying with this girl, and I got to her house and she's like, "Oh, actually, you can't stay here. There was some issue with a guy or something that I didn't know about." I just met her at a gig, you know. I think she was like 5 years older than me or some shit like that. And I was like pretending to be older than I was and all this type of dumb shit. So I ended up just wandering around London for a bit and ended up meeting these junkies by a Turnpike Lane train station, and ended up staying with these junkies in their squat for a little while, which was just like train spotting. Like, it was great. It was just like that. And they were very nice, and they let me have my own mattress in the corner of the room, which none of them touched because they all had lice. So they're like, "Oh, leave that mattress alone," you know, that one. So because we don't want him to get lice because he's the future. They were very excited by the prospect of me sort of as the future. They were like 30, 40-year-old junkies, you know, and I was like little teenage, fresh-faced future person.
Why were they so excited?
I don't know. It was a weird thing. Well, because I don't know. You know how it's when you might have a certain kind of energy about you, and you've got your mission and that type of thing, and that kind of radiates, and people pick up on that shit. Even in this case, it was weird because I was pretending to be Scottish. Because when I first bumped into this guy selling travel cards, he spoke to me in a Scottish accent, and I replied in a Scottish accent, kind of, you know, half like accidental sort of fashion, because I'd been putting on this Scottish accent in a weird job I'd been doing, selling gas door to door. And I'd read that regional accents sold better.
Wow.
So I was like, and I had this Scottish accent I'd worked out from reading Irving Welsh's Train Spotting, which is written in phonetic Scottish, the book. It's pretty weird now. Now I think about it, and I hadn't put this connection together before, that I'm reading Train Spotting by Irving Welsh, which is written in phonetic Scottish, and it's about junkies. And then I go to London and I instantly fall in with some junkies. But I responded in phonetic Scottish, so I was speaking like that. So it was like, "Oh, what's your name?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I don't know what I'm doing here." And I was speaking like this Scottish accent like this, kind of accidentally. And then I had to stick with it the whole time I was living with it, which was a couple months.
How long was that?
It was a good couple months. And he took me back to his squat, and they introduced me to his girlfriend. He's like, and she's like, "Oh, where are you from? I'm Scottish." He was, this is it. He was Northern Irish, and I put on Scottish for some reason. But then his girlfriend was Scottish, and he introduced me to his girlfriend, and she's like, "Oh, where are you from?" And I went, "Oh, I've never even fucking been to Scotland." I said, "Oh, Falkirk," because that was this band I loved called Arab Strap. We're from Falkirk, and she goes, "That's where my mom's from. We're in Falkirk." And I went, "Oh, by the post office." and that worked somehow. And that was a weird fucking situation. So but then in that time I stayed with those guys, being Scottish and living in a squat. And then I got myself a job at a book press office, people who did PR for books. And I was photocopying and using their shower, because our shower they just used for banging up in it, like, you know. So I'd go in there early and use the shower, and that in that manner I got carried on going to these gigs and meeting people, and within a couple of months I actually got a job as a music journalist. By going in and getting in, I met someone, and they introduced me to someone who had a job going at this new internet new music news place. And I
What
just
year
went
is
in and
this?
lied. This is like 99. And I just went in and lied and said that I wrote for Mojo magazine. And you could just do shit like that then because there was no fucking way of searching people up and seeing if they were telling the truth. So if you was convincing and you'd like put together a fucking photocopied bullshit thing, like you could get away with shit, you know. So like very quickly, I had a job at a music magazine, and then that translated to other jobs and other music things, and I ended up writing for the enemy and all sorts of shit like that. And it ended up with me being able to get my music in front of people, resulting in getting offered a record deal within about fucking 18 months of that. Maybe 18 months, 2 years of that whole
Wow.
idea.
You know,
Yeah.
it's fascinating because what you did, it seems to me, from someone who's not close to the music industry, so let me know if I'm wrong on this. What you did is similar to a kid who wanted to be a music curator and built a Spotify playlist that took off, and then you inserted your own music in that. Is that what you
Yeah.
did in the 1999 version of it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, first I did, and I did it multiple times. So I created my own magazine, fanzine, so I could like get tickets to gigs and get to meet these people. Then I blagged my way into an existing thing, and then use that and build. And well, this is it, because it wasn't just. It's a lot bit, like deeper a story than what I told, and it would take hours to tell. But part of what I did was I wrote a column. I sort of created a space within the magazine, and it became a very popular column. And after it reached a certain level of popularity, I started inserting my music as an MP3 download at the end of the article.
Wow.
And then, so because the whole music industry was reading this column, because it was kind of like a gossipy, Hunter S. Thompson-esque kind of what's really going on at London after show parties, world debauchery type shit. So everyone was reading that fucking thing. And then I started sticking my music at the bottom of it. And, yeah. Yeah, and it was, it's like Soulja Boy did a thing not long after that where he would upload tracks to Napster and pretend the title them was 50 Cent songs. So you'd download a 50 Cent song off Napster and you'd get Soulja Boy.
Wow.
And I remember that fucking happening to me. Like, if just before In the Club was popping off, that whole mixtape, if you downloaded anything from that, half the chances were you'd get a Soulja Boy song.
So you really were a pioneer of the internet, a pioneer of using this medium to get out your message, get out your writing, get out your insights, and you became a citizen of the internet in a sense. Is that correct?
I had a website as soon as I was literally thinking about this last night and how crazy it is, because I'm that generation that knew no internet, and then suddenly there was internet. Like I went to a music festival and there was no internet and no mobile phones. And you go there on a Thursday, Friday, and you lose all your friends almost immediately, and you don't see them again until Monday. And you don't know what's going on. Back then at music festivals, we used to play this game where you'd start a rumor and wait for it to come back to you. And there's no way of people checking. So you'd say, oh, the prime minister's dead. And then, like the next day, someone would come along and tell you, and be like, fucking, did you hear the prime minister's dead? Like, da, 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 da.
Oh my God.
And you could do shit like that then. So I remember, it was like 97, when I was like 16, 17, that suddenly the internet appears, and I'd been living on my own for a couple of years. And there was this thing called FreeServe, and they were just giving it away at newsagents. It was like a CD that had a free email account attached to it. And I tried that, and basically within a week, I'd made my own website using MS Publisher, which was a word processing program that I used to make my comics and lay out the magazine portion of my comics. And you could just basically do a thing in that where you like right click and convert it to HTML. And it was really bad HTML, but it worked. And I very quickly had a website. And I had a couple of websites, one of which was, so I turned my fanzine into an online website, which was one of the very first ones. Might have been the first one, who fucking knows? It was really fucking early. And then I set up another one that was kind of sort of tapping into the Manic Street Preachers fan base that were very rabid in the first online fan base. And it was kind of antagonizing them in a weird sort of way, but I don't know, it was a weird thing. I was basically kind of using that energy to then drive into my other shit, sort of trollish sort of fashion, but that was mutually useful, and they all liked it, and they liked having a place to come and hang out and like have beefs. And the way in modern culture war stuff, it used to kind of exist in a smaller fandomy form with music fandoms at the very, very early start of the internet. And I had one of the first places where that energy was channeled, which is very strange to think about now as well. And people would meet on there, and then they'd all go to gigs together, and it facilitated a bunch of kind of like fights and kind of music industry dramas between music journalists and all sorts of weird shit.
Did you know? It sounds like a master plan, right? Like you knew you were gonna be you're gonna make your music popular, and you were gonna first do this and then do that. Was it actually a master plan, or was it, now looking in hindsight, this is what I did?
It was a plan.
It was a plan.
I think looking back how successful it was, also considering I didn't know that much. But you've got to bear in mind, like I said, I just read lots of music magazine. I read lots of books. I used to just ferociously read from when I was like a tiny kid, from when I was like 3. I was reading a lot. And it was just, so looking back, it was a combination of having an aim and reverse engineering. And the way now I think I've got terms for this. Like, okay, so you have your aim, you reverse engineer your aim, you set up systems via Scott Adams' whole systems goals, and the systems will carry you to that aim. And that's what I did back then. But it was a cross between that and then also the thoughts become things, because I'm obsessing over this train spotting book. And that turns into literally living within a situation just like that book.
I got chills.
So I'm reading a book about junkies, and I very quickly end up living with a load of junkies. It's like the stuff that I was obsessing over became the stuff that happened. And this kept going on right up until when I got my first, when I came out to America and got my first record deal with Interscope Records. It keeps going to now. That's just how the world works. But it's just interesting looking back on those early years. That's what happened. And it's also weird that the internet appears and you just use it and you don't think about what you're doing. And it's this radical fucking societal transformation. And I was right in there immediately doing everything I could with it. And it's just bizarre to think.
Why were you right in there right away?
Well, it's just a tool. Humans do this, right? Here's a rock. What could I do? You pick up the rock. You could draw a smiley face on the wall. You could smash in the head of the leader of your tribe. Now you've got technology. John Vervaeke talks about we're natural born cyborgs, right? From the very beginning. But there's always this, people in the chat of my stream the other day were like, some people were saying, they didn't like Elon Musk and this AI thing. We need to stop it. And it's like, but when have humans ever stopped anything? And they're like, it's not natural. It's like, what have we ever done that's natural? The only natural thing about us is our cyborg nature. We've always used technology. This is technology. This allows me to, exist in areas of the world I otherwise wouldn't be able to exist in. This T-shirt, this clothing, everything we're using now. So it's weird. It's kind of a strange thing for humans to sort of draw a line at some point and say, okay, we won't do any more of this cyborging after this point.
Well,
that's what Dune is about, right?
I haven't read Dune, but I need to check it out. But that's what Tim Urban talks about of Wait But Why, when he speaks about and writes about how if you look at someone from 1900, they might be shocked to death by how we live today because of the speed of communication, all this crazy stuff. But he believes that technology is moving faster and faster to the point where we might be shocked to death in our own lifetime of something that happened in the past year or in the next year. And he says it's just moving faster and faster. So what's your take on that?
My take on that is he's correct in one way, but in another way he's incorrect, because we're rarely shocked. We adapt so fucking fast, right? We acclimatize so fast to everything. It's one of the most amazing things about humans. I always say, if there was a zombie outbreak tomorrow, we'd have the whole new system worked out by Monday, and we'd all be kind of comfortable with it almost. We saw that happen. We had such radical change happen last year. People adjust very quickly and acclimatize very quickly. The technology thing is completely true. I remember listening to a comic book writer called Alan Moore talking about steam theory back in the early 2000s. And steam theory proposed that if you look at the distance between the first human invention, say the stone axe, and then the baths of Rome, the amount of things that were invented in that time, the amount of time it takes to invent the same amount of stuff So and how so basically, what were they saying at that point? That by between 1960 and 1970, that whole process is sped up to the point between in that decade, human information doubled, right?
Yep.
In that one decade. But it keeps compounding and getting smaller and smaller, the time difference. And it was predicted using that math that by 2015, you would be at the point where more was being created in a second than in previous human history.
Correct, right?
At that point, you go from a fluid culture where you can kind of see what's happening. It's like a stream moving along. You get to the point where so much is going on at once, it's like steam. And when it's like steam, something could be invented now that completely changes the world by breakfast time. And that is where we are. That's what we see happening. Yet, in answer to your question, we're not that surprised by any of it. We adapt so fast that we kind of almost take it for granted at this point that things will be radically different. We're like, okay, so here's this new thing, and okay, fine, we adapt to that. That's the only thing I see in that. I don't see anyone even being shocked. If you think like, we had the Pentagon confirming the existence of UFOs this year. No one gave a shit. This is something that 10 years ago, the X-Files and that whole period, it had been like what? Disclosure. That's what everyone's aiming at. Well, we've got disclosure and no one fucking cares. It made no difference.
Wow.
Because humans are that way. Like, even if some fucking aliens turned up on the White House lawn, people wouldn't be very shocked for very long. It'd be fucking memes within 20 minutes.
It's wild to think about, and it's really true. Our ability to adapt is so crazy. And so I'm curious about, you mentioned before about your obsessions and how your obsessions in your mind have turned into reality time and time again. I'm curious about what you're obsessing about today.
What, this very, very day?
Or this moment, or this month, or this year? What are your obsessions now that you believe are going to turn into reality, or maybe you don't believe they're going to turn into reality? But what is just on your mind that you can't stop thinking about?
Well, I've channeled all that stuff quite deliberately now, and I've channeled everything after decades of my creative stuff being kind of scattershot. As in, I would have all these big ideas and I would do them, and then I would have another big idea and do it. And the issue I was having was I was always far too ahead of everybody else. So the record I made for Interscope in 2005, the ideas in that were not popular in the mainstream, became the mainstream popular ideas like fucking 15, 20 years later. So like I was doing sort of real life emo sad boy rapping, which Little Peep and those guys did about 15 years later. I was wearing fucking makeup and fucking high-heeled fucking shoes and fucking glam kind of gear and fucking, this like rock glam turbo stuff that people have just started doing now. I was rapping over glitter beats, which Kanye did on Black Skinhead about 15 years later. At that point, I was doing triplet rhyming, which Migos ended up doing about like 15 years later. In like 2007, I was doing 2006, 2007, I was doing kind of pre-EDM rapping over dance music bootleg mashups, which became the dominant musical form around about 5 years, 7 years after that. Like all this, I was doing all this stuff and having all these ideas, but I never held on to anything for long enough for it to gain mainstream acceptability and then profit off that. I was always far too ahead. When I was doing, when I first signed to Interscope, I was already doing these animated music videos on Newgrounds that were getting 500,000 views in a week. And I had a website and a blog site, and I was releasing online mixtapes, which didn't exist then. If you look in Wikipedia, it says Ghostface had the first online mixtape, but if you look it up, I had one years before that.
Wow.
And the head of new media at Interscope Records called me up and asked me what I was doing and how I was doing it and what systems I was using, because they wanted to start all the other artists doing the same thing. Anyway, the point being, I spent years and years being like way too fucking ahead of my time, and also not sticking to any one thing for long enough. So I just keep moving in. Here I do. So anyway, when when I invented MEANINGWAVE, I was listening to James Altucher the week I did the first JBP track, and I was listening to James Altucher, and he said, quadruple down on what's working. I said, what did I do this week? I did that JBP song. I did that Grand Theft Auto. Why would anyone? Sorry, that you're only supposed to go after the goddamn train, CJ, whatever it was, song. I did another song sampling some Welsh people talking about the idea of Hittite. The Peterson one has done really well. People really like that. Let me just do more of that then. So I'll do more of that. I really like doing that. It's a thing I've been doing stuff like that for 15 years anyway, sampling people talking, turning it into songs. So let me just quadruple down on sampling people talking and turning it into songs. So I did. And now here we are. I've been doing that seriously and developing that into a genuine art form and a genuine psychotechnology and way of, and I've got a whole fucking roadmap mapped out for fucking decades of shit to do. So I'm just doing that. I'm going all in on that, and I'm turning that into all that it can be. So that's what I'm focusing on, and turning it, the thoughts that are turning into reality. And it's the whole visual aesthetic and the way it looks and everything. I'm just really doing that. And then outside of that, I'm paying attention to what's happening in the world on a kind of narrative level. And that's interesting. But it's important. I'm doing my best not to give any of that shit too much of my turbo powerful cosmic energy, because it's already fucking ridiculous enough as it is. And then I guess the other thing, which is developing, and it's kind of partly via my son, is that there is a new art form developing and emerging, and a new way of telling stories and a new way of communicating that's currently being born, and is the thing that my son's generation will really master in a Scorsese-like fashion. And I'm paying attention to that and engaging in that. And that's partly going to be the whole blockchain world will facilitate that. It's partly what Terence McKenna was talking about when he had his ideas of the future, in which if an alien species visited us from the outside, we would look as we did in the beginning, just naked, in harmony with nature, just healthy, happy, content. But if you go in our minds, there's all these menus, and there's this whole fucking augmented reality kind of infrastructure mapped over everything. And I look at you, and you appear to me as you wish to appear. You've got whatever clothes you want. Maybe you've got blue skin and fucking giant horns or something, right? And it's like that. The whole world is this mapped video game. And maybe your role in life is to be the fucking forge. And to be the forge, to be the guy who has the forge, the blacksmith, you actually have to be a fucking blacksmith. You have to actually have those physical skills and all that type of thing. And people will come to you. And people will come to you physically, and they will come to you like via, it being visual like this, but you see it as real life in your mind, and that's everything. And that whole thing is connected to sort of choose your own adventure-esque story narratives, which map onto the real world, and everything is kind of divvied up into this thing. And what happens is the best story is the story that wins, because that's what people gravitate towards. Anyway,
how can we tell better stories?
What's that?
How can we tell?
And we'll have to, because those will be the ones that people want to play. I see this happening the way my son and all his kids, they play, and the way they play inside Minecraft and Roblox, and they just create their own stories and universes and worlds, and each person has their own role within the story, and that role is mapped to what they're really good at in real life. And they don't work this out. They don't sit there and go, okay, you're good at this and you're good at that. They naturally seem to gravitate towards these roles that they create for themselves and characters they create for themselves within the narrative. It's very interesting watching them unfurl this new thing that will replace Hollywood and the AAA video game industry and all of these things that are killing themselves in front of our eyes.
It's really the decentralization of media, of video games, of everything is making the individual stronger than ever before in human history, and allowing people like your son eventually to prosper because of it. Because 25 years ago he could play a video game all he wants, and you'd have a parent saying you'll never make money doing that. And today you have kids making hundreds of thousands, millions, playing video games, sharing stories in their real, authentic way that's connecting with people in a magical Symphony,
And that's
really.
nothing compared to what's coming.
Totally.
That's like nothing compared to what's coming. And like you were saying earlier, the things we will see in our lifetime due to the sped up nature of the fact that we're now in Steam country, we're in Steam territory. You think like my nan, she lived to 96. She saw the radio come into being. You know what I mean? She was like a teenager during the World War, and that was fun to her. She was like running around, like hanging out with American soldiers and getting into scrapes and adventures and all this type of shit. Like she saw the TV, she saw the internet, all these things come into being. She saw nations rise and fall. She saw fucking in her lifetime. And what we will see will make that shit look fucking so tame.
Pedestrian.
Yeah, and like shit's now so compressed that a decade fits into a season. Like what would have been a previous decade of, say, geopolitical and technological advancement, and happens. You now have that shit happen in the summer.
Yeah,
you know?
that's what I feel like. I've been really diving deep recently into the world of NFTs, and I know you have as well. And when I'm really attached to it and really in tune with what's going on, I say to myself, oh my God, the past 24 hours has felt like an entire month or 2 months worth of information that I've consumed and news, and it's crazy. And so what you're saying has certainly proven true from my own perspective. But tell me about NFTs. How did you get into it? What was that like in that experience, and how's it going for you?
Well, it's this thing we've been waiting for a long time. I don't know if you ever read Jared Lanier.
Mm-mm.
He was with the guy who invented VR. He was one of the early internet guys, and he had a book. He had a book. I might be misrepresenting it by this point. Maybe it's growing some kind of legend in my mind. But as I recall, when I read it, in the issue when the internet was first sort of being unveiled as a product, there were two ways in which it could have gone in order to monetize it. And one way was to essentially have everyone pay a monthly fee. And then that gets divvied up between everyone on the internet whose stuff is accessed. So if you have a podcast, I go to your podcast, you get a tiny micro transaction or piece of that fee. And then the stuff that does the best gets more stuff and but everyone gets kind of paid for their work. So it's like you could have that model, or you could have advertiser supported it. And that was easier to implement at that point, so they went with that. But there were lots of kids that were like, oh, this could lead to these problems. It led to all those problems and worse, way quicker than anyone fucking imagined. So now what the whole blockchain thing is doing partially is kind of going back to that initial idea of the internet. And it's also going back to another initial thing of the internet, which is in the early days of the internet, everyone had a website of their own. Like I had my website that I made from Publisher. And it had these GIFs on it. It looked the way it did. And that was an expression of what I was into. It wasn't trying to look like another website because there wasn't really other websites to try and look like in that way. Everything was a reflection of the person. People had these GeoCities pages that were cascading waterfalls of GIFs and all this type of shit, right? Everyone's fucking MySpace page looked completely different, had their own songs on it. People learned to do little bits of code to make their pages look different. Then along comes Facebook. And after initially tricking people into using it, they had a music player and shit. They suddenly like, right, everything's got to look the same. And you can't do this. And very suddenly the internet all started to look the same. And all that individual expression was gone. And everyone handed over all their data, and all their individual blogs became a Facebook post or became a Twitter post. And suddenly everyone handed over their individuality to these like megacorps. And it became like this kind of sort of authoritarian, sort of communist like nightmarescape in a weird sort of way, but corporate. Right. And then they see them start trying to do that to the actual world. It's funny because in real time, what happens is the culture responds, and the whole crypto NFT culture is going back to that original spirit and that individual spirit and creating individual communities based around aesthetics or ideas that are unique to those spaces and those people and those tribes. It's like, all right, we don't need to be fucking all of us on Twitter screaming at each other. We can have fucking 100 of us over here, and we're the fucking monkey people, and we have little pictures of ourselves as Dayglow and monkey guys, and we hang out here and talk about our cool shit, and we're fun. And then those guys over there do the dragon thing, or whatever the fuck it is, right? And it takes it back to that spirit, and it's a beautiful thing to see happening, and it's exactly on target as predicted with regards to the way culture swings from these two opposing ends of psychedelic to what you could define as maybe punk. every 7 years it does this thing, and every time it hits one side, it hits harder. And we knew that in 2021 it was going to be back to the psychedelic thing, which we see now unfurling in these various ways. We see everything becoming more psychedelic and sci-fi and colorful and crazed and lunatic, and the ideas become more out there. And we move away from the sort of conservative punk, like the whole thing, like the art style, the drugs, all this stuff, always does that. But every time it does it, it's like, you can think of it like a wrecking ball. And every time it swings, it picks up more momentum. And this time, as it hits, your auntie's online. Everyone's fucking online. Back the previous time it happened, there was a few weirdos looking into conspiracy stuff or making weird little websites or coming up with new technology. This time, fucking everyone's online. It's a way bigger fucking thing. It has way bigger repercussions and way bigger potential for permanently altering the so-called real world.
So take me through these two opposing pendulums, and I need some more examples to really understand into my head. You said punk and
you can think of it this way.
What are the two pendulums?
Because I'm a musical person, I think of it in that form, right? So you go punk rock, jang, 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 angry, angry, nihilism, despair, rah, rah, rah. Psychedelia, way, whoa, hippie, colors, trippy, everything all over the place, big ideas. So the punk thing is very, very tight, 3 chords. Psychedelic thing all over the place, fucking doesn't
free, open
even have
spirit.
A verse chorus. Yeah. And you see that, okay, so so in like 1991 is a great example of this happening. 91, if you look at the music, it was like acid house, it was like hippie, like De La Soul, it was like different cultures collaborating, indie and dance were all merging together, all these bands and stuff. Almost overnight, suddenly it's grunge and Wu-Tang, and suddenly it's angry and raw, and suddenly the design that people are wearing black t-shirts, and so in 1991 people were taking ecstasy. By 93 people were doing, it was like cocaine and speed, right? And then you have a period of that, and then it comes out the other side and it goes back to the so you see this and you can track it, and it happens. So right, so 2012, it was Odd Future, it was fucking racism, that's gay. Well, that's some shit our parents used to fucking care about. Like literal Tyler the Creator quote from 2012. They're wearing tie-dye t-shirts. Everyone's doing Molly. Da. 2013, almost fucking overnight, we suddenly plunged into the culture wars and fucking all that craziness. And it's like, I remember, and I was literally predicting that by 2020, which would be the 7-year culmination of going back in that direction, people would be wearing all black. They would be out on the streets setting shit on fire, which was fucking last summer. It was exactly that. You see it all in conspiracy stuff. So in 2012, all the conspiracy websites are concerned with the fake alien invasions. 2013, suddenly everyone's just worrying about feminism and Islam and these sort of grounded earthly concerns. This year, which went on for 7 years, and then this year, suddenly shit's getting crazy again. Suddenly people are talking about aliens and fucking insane conspiracy type ideas, shit of that nature. And you can track it on every aspect of culture, technology, appearance, so on and so forth.
What's going on there?
Well, I mean, I just notice these things and pay attention to them, and you sort of use them as the way. I tweeted something about this earlier. Saying you don't need to immerse yourself in global events to the point of drowning and suffocation. It's not useful, but it is useful to know whether you need to carry an umbrella when you go outside. So if you pay attention to these things enough to be able to use them usefully within your life. Here's the thing I've noticed, right? There's a big difference between intelligence and being smart. We've all seen over the past year a lot of people that are really intelligent do some really dumb shit and make some dumb calls. And you're like, how is this possible? You're so fucking intelligent. I really respect you. But if you can't map that intelligence onto your own life in a useful, practical fashion, that means you're not smart. That's not smart. So you can have somebody who's really smart. They're not that intelligent, but they're smart enough to be able to apply the things they notice and learn to their own life, and therefore, survive and thrive in a way that maybe someone really fucking intelligent can't, because they're so focused in on this one thing, they can't see everything else around it. As far as why this is happening, some people think it's to do with planetary bodies. Some people like it's to do with sun activity and those. So there's cycles and everything, right? This is just one cycle. You can track other cycles. If you look at what's happening in the world right now, it's pretty, in a lot of ways, it's almost identical to what was happening like around 100 years ago. You know, we had prohibition and all that type shit happening in America, and we had like the fucking what happened in the 20s last time, with all the various things that are happening with regards to potential conflicts and genocidal occurrences can all be sort of tracked, and you see those things echoing back throughout time. The cycles and everything. Why that might be, I ain't a fucking doctor, you know, but you know, I pay attention to the practicalities of this shit. You know, like, okay, how can I use this in my life, and how can I use this to keep my family and I safe and thriving, no matter what's going on.
Yeah, what are the practicalities of knowing where we fall, and where are we currently on the scale?
We're at the dawn of what I dubbed the neo psychedelic age. You might think of that as the neo psychedelic sci-fi age. You know, so all that stuff that we had in our movies and stuff, that's all coming into being now. That whole sci-fi world that was in all our comic books and in all our movies and all that stuff, that's all happening now. Most of that stuff exists, good or ill, you know. And we're at the point of the game where we've got to dream up the new shit. You know, we've got to dream up the big new ideas. And we've already done all the 1984, Brave New World, Matrix, all those Terminator and Matrix is the same fucking thing. Matrix is the sequel to the Terminator, right? You have rising machines, and then the machines build the Matrix. We've had all those great ideas. So we need some more ideas, and we need more of these sort of Star Trek Next Generation type ideas, I think. And we need new ideas that we haven't fucking had. And these are the ideas that our children will find it easier to come up with, because, like I was saying, I remember no internet.
Mm-hmm.
And the world that we came into was a world built by people who didn't have internet. And internet is such a staggering... we do not understand yet what this is and what the ramifications of it are. It's so new. Think about how long we've been around, and this thing comes along that is as seismic a shift as fucking fire.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just at the fucking beginning of it. This NFT thing, all that type of thing, is just the beginning. The NFT thing, that's like the waterfall GIF, you know, page. What was the fucking Geospaces page or whatever? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so early. We do not understand. But the people born into it, who've never known anything else, my son just assumes that he can pick up a thing, and whatever's in his mind, he can make that exist.
Mm-hmm.
And he just assumes that he can navigate that world with his best friends, who happen to be in completely different places and countries. Yeah, we're in Mexico right now. His best friend he met in LA back in the day. That kid is now in Canada. His friends from LA, they're still in LA. They all play together. He's got friends. He's got cousins in Wales that he plays with, and they all play together in these worlds of their own imagining.
Wow.
And that's normal to them. They just expect that. So what they build and how they interface with the world and what they create, I mean, we can't even fucking imagine what that is. I mean, we kind of have intonations, but so that's what's going on now. And that's what's interesting right now. That's what's exciting right now. It's the world that we build in tandem with these creatures, these alien creatures that are our offspring, who know nothing else.
You know, I spoke to Mike Maples and on episode 166 of this podcast, and he was saying how the organizations and the companies that succeeded in the COVID world of 2020 were those that were post-internet, and the ones that failed, the institutions that failed, were those pre-internet. And if you think about it, what just struck me in this moment is it was also true for human beings as well, in some respect, in the sense of the people who were born after the internet, maybe this is just a coincidence, were spared and they were safe and they were free. But those before the internet, they had more symptoms. They had more, the death rate was higher. So just an interesting perspective that I never considered before.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? That's where we're at. That's where we're at in the story. And this is why I always say it's very important to stay in touch with culture. Even if you don't like it, you might not like the music that's coming out now, but just keep aware of it. Like, because you always understand it that way. If you stop listening to music for a few months or something, like, you lose some of that glue that holds everything together, and you become adrift from it. You're kind of you're going away like that, and you don't understand it, and you can't communicate with it. And being in touch with that energy, that cultural energy, and the energy of you, that will keep you alive and keep you useful and keep you able to navigate the world. And you have to be able to stay alive and navigate this world, because we're in STEAM territory and shit's changing every second. And if you don't know how to fucking navigate this new terrain, you will get fucking lost. You'll fall down a hole. You'll break your leg. You'll die. You'll get eaten by a fucking bear. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
and that's what you 100%. Saw. That's what you're saying.
See, it's really interesting because you not listening to music would be like a writer not reading books, or a podcaster not listening to podcasts. Like, you can do it. You can go in your silo and create something magical that way. But what really is going to happen is all that's going to come through you, and you're going to listen to all that information, bring all that information in, and it's going to create something magical because of that. And that's what MEANINGWAVE has done, from my perspective.
Not just even magical, useful, because it's not useful if what you're creating is, say, sonically detached from the people that it's for.
Yes.
So if I just sort of stop listening, for example, love Van Morrison, love Eric Clapton. They've just put out some new protest record. It sounds so of times gone by, and not even in a nostalgic, cool way. It just kind of sounds stuck in the period where people started like digitally recording rock bands or something. That it just doesn't have a huge amount of utility for the people that would, not all the people, but for a lot of people that could benefit from it. Certain people it will be useful for, certain people's parents or whatever the fuck, but it could be so much more useful if the people involved in that had stayed present. Because you can make a classic record with contemporary techniques that doesn't sound like you're like David Bowie trying to make a drum and bass record in '96 or whatever. But the only way you can do that is just by staying in the moment and always being in the moment, which is the fucking best advice for living anyway, in general, right? All of life's unnecessary pain and suffering only exists as a direct result of people being outside of the moment. You're anxious because you're not now worrying about something that might happen. You're sad and forlorn because you're thinking of something in the past or whatever the fuck. If you're right now, you're cool. So that applies to everything, and that definitely applies to creation. If you want to be useful, and why else do shit? Otherwise, just keep it to yourself. Why are you releasing music? There used to be a thing people used to say, it was a cliche in indie bands in the 90s. They'd say, I make it for myself, and if anyone else likes it, that's a bonus. And you're like, why do you even fucking release it? Like, it's such a fucking weird attitude. It's like, I understand kind of where that comes from, but like, if what you're doing is not useful, what is the fucking point?
Well, it could be useful to you, right?
But if it's you, then why put it out? So,
if something is useful to you, then it can be useful to the world as well. And therefore,
there's the way, like Stan Lee's whole thing of he would write stories that would please him, thinking that, well, he's not that different to other people, so other people would like them. If he wrote, but he wanted other people to like them. That's why he did it like that, because he wanted his shit to be useful. He wanted his shit to be resonant with the culture. He wanted to, have an effect or have a place in people's lives. He wanted his stories to touch people or what have you. God bless that man. But yeah, where were we? Yeah, useful. Be useful.
How do you decide which people to highlight in MEANINGWAVE?
Sure. I don't think too much about stuff. I've been doing this hyper-productivity thing since February 2018. And part of that means don't fucking sit around second-guessing things. It means keep fucking moving. It means pay attention to synchronicities and use those as signposts that will let you know that you're on the right path. It means kind of Bruce Lee, don't think, feel, in a way. Be like that. And there is a journey that I'm on, and there's a path, and there's a direction, there's an aim, and there's been a reverse engineering of said aim, and there's a grand story that I'm telling. and it's kind of like you have your story, and you have yours. Here's your story, and different people will have a different perspective on that story. One way one could think of it is the way that George R.R. Martin writes his Song of Ice and Fire books. I don't know if you know aware of how he does that. Like he has perspective chapters. So each chapter is from the perspective of a character. So you'll have first chapter is Bran, and it's this little 7-year-old boy's way, his view of the world. So he sees his father up there as this figure, and he hears the servants talking about this from over there. Next chapter is from the point of view of Cersei, the queen, and she's a fucking evil bitch, but you get it from inside her head. And so you kind of get to piece together what's really going on from between these things. Each one chapter is just one person's view of it. It's not necessarily the truth. It's their angle. So I will give you Alan Watts looking at the story from one side of the room and Jordan Peterson looking at the story from the other side of the room, David Foster Wallace over there, and so on and so forth. And we'll look at this story and we'll look at this idea, and then we'll move on to the next one that builds from that one, that's moving towards one that will need the foundation of all of these to make sense and for people to really get the most out of it, and so on and so forth. So it's part of that. So basically, it's kind of, I will notice someone's perspective being I think of it, Peterson once said something about how when he was reading the Bible, he'd keep reading the same fucking passage over and over for like years. And when it finally made sense, it would glitter. He'd see a passage and it glittered, and it made sense. And it's like that. It's when I hear something that glitters, it's like, that's the thing. And I don't think about it any more than that. And I use that. People often say to me, oh, use this person. And I'll go, and almost instantly, like, there's something off with that. And I won't know why, but maybe I'll do some research later on and I'll discover that, they were a liar or insane or had some really fucking evil ideas in other parts that you might not have known, or whatever the fuck it was. But like, I just always pay attention to that intuition of what's glittering, what's salient, and what feels right, and just fucking move and keep moving.
What's the significance of synchronicities to you?
Well, they're signposts, in my understanding. Like I said, practically, as a practical thing. So when you notice synchronicities, when I notice synchronicities in the world, the more I notice, the more I am on the right path, and the more magical and glittering everything becomes. And this is a thing that many have observed. I remember reading Malcolm X's biography on a plane when I was going to America to get that record deal. And he talked about when he noticed synchronicities in his life, it meant he was walking with Allah, is what he would say. Walking with what? Allah.
Oh, Allah. God. Allah. Yeah.
Right. My friend Grant Morrison, who's a comic book writer, who I was a big fan of for years before we met over some synchronistical stuff. He was also a chaos magician, and he used to say, I remember him writing that the first step towards becoming a chaos magician is to notice synchronicities in the world and start noticing them. And the more you notice, the more you will see, and the world will open up to you, and you'll be able to start harnessing that energy and that power basically in that harness, turning thoughts into things type thing. So in a practical application thing, I just started going, okay, I'll pay attention to synchronicities, and I'll really pay attention. I'll go, boom, there you are, boom, there you are. And I will use that as signposts. And the more there are, the closer to the path I am. And if they start to become less, maybe I need to readjust and recalibrate a bit. Maybe I've gone a bit off track. And, like in those video games, when you move the little control around, it starts vibrating. And then the more it vibrates, I'm supposed to go that way,
What practical steps do you take when you feel yourself out of alignment, or the synchronicities haven't happened in a while? You feel that controller vibrating, you're in the wrong direction. What do you do to get yourself back on track?
They always fucking happen. So
you've been on track for a while.
Yeah, since I've been doing this hyperproductivity zone inhabitation experiment, they have not gone away. They will increase in ferocity at points. And as they increase in ferocity, you kind of lean deeper into that direction. So I've never had them since I've been doing this, which is part of how I know this is the right thing to be doing. Sometimes I have maybe deviated slightly. I mean, there was a period where I was like maybe live streaming too much, right? Which was eating into my time for actually making the music. And, that I was learning a lot doing that. So that was a useful thing to be doing. But there was some periods during that where I had a slight lessening. And then I would go, okay, focus, make more records type thing, and it would increase. So definitely the making of the music is the thing to be doing. And it's also the right music. So it's like, I'll have an idea for a project that maybe wasn't in the plan. And you're like, is this the right thing to do? And then you'll open Instagram and the top post will be a picture of that person or something like that. Shit like that always fucking happens. Like always. If I ask the question, like a prayer or something, it will be answered almost instantly by something in my surrounding. Like a message flashes up on a laptop. There's something on the side of a bus. Like a page in a book that you open, the first word happens to be the answer. That type of thing.
It's a magical feeling of awe and mystery. And
Well,
you
if you
just
keep that going, that's what you get, right? And you pay attention and you really lean into that and you feel that. You feel that awe and mystery. You truly believe it. You like a child. Then the world will unfold in that manner and keep unfolding in that manner.
Yeah. How do you go about teaching a child that?
Well, they already have that. What you do is you don't smash it out of them. What normally happens is kids have that, and then they go to school and they get whacked around the head until it's gone. So the first thing I did was make sure that my son didn't go to school. He went to preschool and he has activities. He goes to jiu-jitsu and this, that, and the other. He has lots of friends, but he doesn't go to an institution that's specifically set up to destroy his fucking creativity and his soul and turn him into a little automaton for 19th century industrial production, which is what the school system we currently have was specifically set up for and hasn't significantly deviated from since.
The school system was set up for a pre-internet world, that's for sure.
It was set up for fucking industrial revolution era world. It was like it was like literally 19th century. To create people to work in that world, to function and trabajo, as the Spaniards would call it, actually job work. It hasn't deviated since. Unless you go to Oxford or something unless you go to one of the schools where they train you to be part of the ruling class. But that's still deliberately destroying the person and breaking them down and rebuilding them to be the thing that they need to use, to be the sort of Boris Johnson type person or whatever it is they need. It's still destroying the fucking individual and reimagining them as a tool.
Yeah. And you just have such a free-flowing, open energy about you. It's so obvious from talking to you for the past hour. You're just full of love, full of intuition, full of guiding you. You're willing to dance around in the room, do motions. You are a living, breathing human being full of love, it seems like, from talking to you for an hour. What do you think has contributed to that the most?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I've had lots of stuff happen to me in my life that could have made me bitter and resentful. I had a rough time at school. I had a rough time as a kid. I had a rough time when I left home. Before all that music journalism type stuff, lots of bad things happened. And during that, lots of bad things happened. Unpleasant things that some people would have turned some people bitter and resentful and sour and super villainous. But I always saw these things as blessings in a way. And I always saw them as adventures. And I always saw my life as a story. And I think that's the thing that I've been lucky in. That was partly to do with my twin loves from when I can remember. I don't remember much before when I was 7. But I remember at 7, I kind of came into full bloom as an individual, I think. And I loved comic books, and I loved music, and I loved sort of anime and these things, and I loved stories. And I saw my life in that kind of mythological perspective. and everything I was doing was part of this mythology. So if I was 16 years, if I was 15, if it was my 15th birthday and I was in a Liverpool in an abandoned building with no roof, having run away from home, and I just had to run away from some creepy predator, and I was like, I just saw that all as part of this story and this adventure. And I knew that I was experiencing things that would be useful later on. And I remember looking up and seeing the big stars above me and thinking, what a fucking magical world, what a magical journey, what a magical ride to be on this is, you know. And I've always kind of had that about me. And that's useful, that's practical. Because if you look at things like that, it's just like I said, you get more of that. So if you go, okay, this is a magical adventure while you're getting punched in the fucking side of the head, rather than go, oh, why me? Why am I always getting punched in the side of the head? Like, and that's what you'll get, you know. And that's what I got. I got a magical adventure. Look at me now. I'm in fucking Mexico, randomly.
Well, yeah, not only the physical location, but the internal flame that is still beating for you, and the passions that you once had as a kid are still the things you devote your time and energy to. That is an incredible accomplishment, and it's just an honor to witness it, truly.
Hey, thanks, brother. Well, I see somewhere in you. Look at you, standing there in New York and fucking doing your fucking epic shit. You know, it's a beautiful thing. And what you see happening now is that, like, everyone's being brought together at this interesting moment in the human story, and because we live in this steam time technological miracle period of the human story, everyone gets to kind of come together like the fucking Avengers or whatever, or like the end of Lord of the Rings or whatever it is, and all these people from all over the world that have this kind of what did Kurt Vonnegut call it? Kurt Vonnegut. Did you ever read Cat's Cradle?
Mm-mm.
Great book.
No.
Great book. And he had an idea in it he had a sort of fake religion in it called Bocanism, and has a thing in the fake religion Bocanism called a karass. And your karass is like the people in your life that you're linked to, and your stories touch each other, and you're basically kind of a family. You might never meet the people in your karass. Some of them are on the other side of the world doing shit, but you are linked, and what you're doing is all together. At the point we're at now, the karass can become so much more apparent, and we could meet each other, and we could talk, and we can hang out, and you can spot people from a distance and go, oh, that's one of them over there, and that's one of us over there, and da-da-da-da-da. And you can wave across the road, and you kind of see each other, you know. You don't even necessarily have to talk. You see each other, like, sometimes you'll see someone across the other side of the gym, whatever, and it's a kind of, you know, what's up type vibe, you know? And we have that going on a global scale, and it's fucking cool.
100%. And how has your karass, you've been able to meet so many of them, you've been able to record tracks with so many of them, and you've been able to make them, your karass, such a part of your own life. How has that personally impacted you in the past 3 years since MEANINGWAVE began?
Yeah, it's just another beautiful, magical aspect of the adventure. And it's something I've been noticing prior to this. Like I said, when I was a little kid, one of my favorite comic book writers, my favorite comic book writer was Grant Morrison. And then we became friends.
So
cool. Through music and stuff, like in like 2012, you know, he had a festival in Vegas, and he had me and Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance come out and do the music, and then we all met and hung out and became friends, and and like you see, I was sort of saw from early how, you know, if you really lean into what it is that you love and you are, and you embody that and you do that, then magical shit will occur, and people will come into your life that are also of that. And if you have specific people that you like and you think about and are in a compatible line of world, you might meet each other if you put yourself in a position where something like that could happen. So I went out and made myself into a music journalist. And then I'm meeting Andrew WK and these sorts of people, and Chili Gonzalez and Errol Alkin, who like teaches me how to DJ just from watching him. He never taught me, but I just watched him, you know, and like he's one of the best DJs in the world. He just happened to be a guy in an indie club, and I hung out, and we were we became friends. And like so many times these things have happened in my life, but it's always been a direct result of just like leaning into the thing that you love and going. And sometimes you might be embarrassed or scared, or sometimes there's some danger, or sometimes there's some putting yourself in a position of potential harm, but you do it. And and the world catches you. You know that thing, like jump off the fucking mountain and you will be caught type thing. But you have to fucking jump off the mountain. You can't wait to be, pushed. Sometimes people wait to be pushed. Sometimes life will eventually push a person, right? You see that happening. But if you will just throw yourself, and I've always thrown myself, as evidence from the answer to the first question, what were you doing on the evening of your 16th birthday? I was leaving home. I was jumping. And that's the lesson.
And in some respect, it feels like, from my perspective at least, that you are still jumping, my friend. And it is such a pleasure to see.
Really, right now, there's a lot of jumping going on right now. And who knows where we will land, but I know it will be a magical adventure.
And I think that's a beautiful place to come to a close. Where can people find more from you?
Probably wherever they are. So wherever they are, have a look for some MEANINGWAVE, have a look for Akira The Don, wherever you might be, whatever platform it is you're on, or whatever vicinity of the world you're in. Maybe go knock on someone's door, and maybe they have some records for you to listen to. Who knows? But Akira The Don is the name of me. The music is called MEANINGWAVE, and you will find it wherever you like to listen to music.
I cannot recommend this music more, and I'm so excited for everyone to press pause right now on this podcast, take it off, and start listening to some MEANINGWAVE. Thank you, Akira, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, brother. Appreciate you.